celebrating 25 years of people-centered and impactful journalism. Hello, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us from wherever you may be on The Pulse. We apologize for the late start, a bit of a technical issue which we have fixed, as you can see. And we are live from our studios in Kokomlemle on digital address GA0992539. Here's what's coming up. Ghana crosses 100 coronavirus cases as it steps into 3 digits with 1 recovery. 132 people have tested positive so far for the virus, 54 of those domestic transmissions. You'll hear from Information Minister who says Ghana expects some $35 million from the World Bank to help deal with this situation. Calls for a lockdown continue as Finance Minister submits to President Akufo-Addo a document detailing the economic implications of a lockdown. Meanwhile, JoyNews is learning the minister is preparing to appear before Parliament with further explanation. And we'll do the usual global update as the World Health Organization warns of more deaths to come. We'll go to Nigeria, where some top government officials have tested positive, and we'll take a look at the situation in the UK, the USA, and in Spain. My name is Kojo Yankson. We're live on DSTV channel 421, on GoTV channel 144. We'll also stream live on YouTube, and you can WhatsApp us on 0540 109009. Let's get into it. Now, as at the morning of 26 March 2020, a total of 54 cases, including 4 deaths, had been confirmed from the regular surveillance systems. All the 4 cases that unfortunately succumbed to the disease were aged and had underlying chronic medical conditions. Now, all the remaining 51 cases are well. 14 of them are being managed at home, and the rest are responding well to treatment on admission in isolation. Now, they're awaiting their test results and will be discharged when the results are negative. The great majority of the confirmed cases are Ghanaians who returned home from affected countries. 7 of them are other nationals, namely Norwegian, Lebanese, Chinese, Dutch, and of course British. The number of confirmed cases among travelers under mandatory quarantine who have been tested is 78. Now, in respect of contact tracing, a total of 970 contacts have been identified and are being tracked. Out of these, 204 have completed the 14-day mandatory follow-up. Now let's go to Parliament, where the Information Minister has been giving some updates. Information Minister Kojo Nkrumah says the President has directed that all individuals who came into the country from abroad on or after the 12th of March 2020 be identified and tested for COVID-19. He says they are to be tested as has been done with those who arrived on Saturday night, out of which many positive cases have so far been detected. Now, he says the Ghana Armed Forces have begun lifting and distributing items donated to Ghana by the Jack Ma Foundation. He's been addressing the media in Parliament.
A good majority of all the cases that Ghana has recorded are persons who came from abroad. Out of this new 132 that has even been updated now, about 78 of them are those that were put in mandatory quarantine. And a good chunk of the 54 or so that are from the general surveillance, a good chunk of them were persons who also came into that jurisdiction. It would have been dangerous if we didn't have a system to trace them and to test them and know. That's when we would have really had very severe risk. But thankfully, we've been able to contain it. Even though that has happened, the President is still interested in finding measures by which we can ensure that we don't even run the risk of significant communal spread. And he continues to review the various options and scenarios and advice that comes to him. So if it becomes necessary that we have to go that far, he will not hide anything from the people of Ghana. We will do well to let people know why those restrictions, if indeed it becomes necessary, will be imposed. Remember that these restrictions are not done for the fun of it. They are very important, and so far we have all been supportive in our own interest. For example, when we said people should go into mandatory quarantine, you recall that some initially were apprehensive, but now the data that is coming out shows us that that restriction itself was in their own interest and in the interest of the 30 million Ghanaians. So if it becomes necessary that we must have some further restrictions in our own interest, His Excellency will do well to take that decision and will let all of us know. As at now, the data available to us, 78 from quarantine, out of the 54 from surveillance, the majority, we are told, also coming from persons who have traveled, does not suggest to us that today, right now, we are going into lockdown. No. But if that decision is made, we will do well to let the people of Ghana know. 20th, let's say, the Ghana Medical Association had suggested it and we had said no. And then they had come out with a press statement. I don't quite recall that even at the meetings where they are apart, they have even tabled a proposal that even deals with the various scenarios. Calling for it is not the difficult part, but handling the various scenarios. The millions of Ghanaians who literally live on a hand-to-mouth basis on a daily basis. If you lock down everything for 14 days, what happens to them? What happens to people who need sanitation, toilet facilities, all of those things? You need to consider all of those. What are the security dimensions? I think this morning we were reading that Jordan earlier went into a lockdown, now has had to come back because security was now becoming something difficult to maintain. So it's not, something that you take lightly. You have to weigh and consider the various scenarios and how to enforce it, etc. And all of those are options that remain on the table. Social distancing.
You have said yourself that if the experts advise as such, the government will consider.
Yes.
And now they advise the Ghana.
Which experts are those?
The person holding the decision.
No. But you see, it's not a one-dimensional decision. It's not because, let's say, one group says it, then that is it. You will hear from the doctors, you will hear from the food security experts, you will hear from the human security experts, the national security people, all of that. So if one dimension says X, you've got to also subject it to the views of all the other persons around the table, and even model the various scenarios for it before you arrive at a decision. These decisions are not made lightly, but we are clear in our minds that today where we stand, we've been able to largely contain the potential importation of cases and continue to review the options, and if we need to escalate in the final raft of measures, His Excellency will do well by the people. It's in about 3 stages. They must first take samples. Taking sample doesn't mean tested. And it takes about 30 minutes to get a good respiratory sample from any of them. We're talking about 1,030 people. So they have taken samples, last time I checked, I think from about 900 and something. And then they have processed through the PCR system a little, I think, over 300 or so. In the next update, we'll give you the very specific numbers. It is out of that you're having about 78 who have ended up testing positive, which was a huge risk if that had not been done. Our expectation is that by Thursday, indeed, we said by Thursday morning, those were the numbers they were giving us. They'll be able to finish all of those ones. They will do their best. They are working around the clock to finish all of those ones so that they can give us the answers.
The last engagement we had together with you and then even the health minister, there was an announcement to the effect that those who had entered the country prior to the kicking in of shutdown will be traced.
Yes.
That's very critical.
Yes.
Those that have been.
The Ghana Immigration Service, working with the Ministry of Communications and their agencies, has the whole database of all of these persons who came in. Initially, we were looking around the 15th, but the President has asked us to go back as far back as the 3rd. So all of that data is available. Some of them have already done 2 weeks, who have not even shown any signs of having been infected. So they just need to do that kind of separation of that data. And then they are going through a process of ensuring that those who need to be tested in that pool are tested. That's the level of the mass testing, quote unquote, that they intend. Those are the at-risk populations that they intend to test, just to be sure that we don't have any, apart from what we've contained, we don't have any hiding in the general population.
50,000 testing kits from the...
That'll be your last one, then I'll go to others.
The 50,000 testing kits that the President mentioned that procurement processes are underway. How far advanced are we? And the Jack Ma's donation?
I know that the Jack Ma Foundation items arrived, I think yesterday they were received. The Ghana Armed Forces has been assisting the Ministry of Finance and the Ghana Health Service to do the distribution. Indeed, I understand that some are already being flown to other parts of the country to circumvent the traditional system where to go to the regions and go to the districts. They are trying to cut through and get some direct supplies because our doctors and our nurses are the first line, and we must ensure that they are protected as they engage with potential cases and also know the case management protocols that are out there.
You just said that government was considering suggestions from other quarters. At which stage will government decide that, okay, at this stage, the country is ready for it?
If it becomes necessary that the country should be locked down in whatever form, that will be the state if it becomes necessary.
Financially, are we ready?
The President has instructed the Minister responsible for finance to first of all build the economic impact assessment, which he did about, I think, 2 or 3 weeks ago and even presented parts of it to Parliament. But he has also further instructed him to work out the implications of any further measures on the economy and how to put in place economic measures, what people call a stimulus program, to ensure that these measures don't adversely hurt the economy and people. And all things being equal, once he's done, he will brief the nation through Parliament on the economic measures that are being used there.
James Agalda is calling for amnesty to release petty offenders out of the prisons, to decongest the prisons. So
I think about a number of days ago, His Excellency the President instructed the Minister responsible for the Interior and his team to work out what that possibly means and if it was feasible and recommended. They are yet to submit their recommendation. It will be looked at and a decision made.
what timelines are you looking at?
I don't have a timeline to that, sir.
Assurance to the public, there are some social media messages going on that there's going to be a lockout this Saturday. What assurance?
I've just explained all the conversations around that. Do you have a question?
Is there any plans to get additional text like centers for the northern sector?
I think Noguchi has explained how they are going about that. I won't want to go into
and also
that.
the education, how are they faring? It seems
The Ghana Health Service tells us that a good number of them are doing very well. We've asked them to give a breakdown of those who are well, responding to treatment, who are recovering, or who may be in critical condition. So we've challenged them to put out that data very quickly so that people also get a fair sense of how, so let's expect that data hopefully before the day is over.
Talking about the data,
No.
There seem to be
There were
having a
two
back.
figures of people who were dead. I mean, from Ghana Health Service, we hear 3, but from other reports, we hear
Which other official report is this?
Information Minister Kojo Oppong Nkrumah there addressing the media in Parliament House. Now let's go live back to Parliament House where our correspondent Joseph Hokubat Ogakpo is standing by with more information. Now, Joseph, thank you for your time. We understand the Finance Minister is making plans to come and explain the economic impact of a lockdown to Parliament. What else do we know about this?
And so the disclosure that we got from the Minister for Information, Kojo Oppong Nkrumah, in Parliament a while ago, is that this is a document that the President has directed the Finance Minister to actually go ahead and put together. He was responding to questions and demands for a lockdown of the country, the latest of which is coming from the former Deputy Minister for Interior, James Agalda, who is the minority spokesperson on Defense and Interior. Earlier in the course of the day, he said it's now or virtually never, and that Ghana has gone past the time for a national lockdown, and he repeatedly made that demand in an interaction with the media earlier today. And the Minister for Information, Kojo Oppong Nkrumah, was responding to that a while ago. He made the point that till date, as we speak, the data that's coming from experts and even the advice that's coming from experts and the tracking with the data that they're putting together does not support the idea of a lockdown of the country now. But he went on to say that it's a decision that the President will take subsequently, and when that time comes, that will be communicated to Ghanaians. And in the course of that conversation, the Information Minister did disclose that the President has again directed that the Finance Minister actually undertakes an economic assessment when it comes to what the possible impact of a lockdown will be. and that he again disclosed that this is information that will again help them model the various possible measures of what a lockdown should look like, even if that becomes necessary. And he responded specifically to the request that's coming from the Ghana Medical Association as well for this lockdown. You'll recall that Kojo Nkrumah had indicated that the experts are being consulted. So I did put that to him, that the experts are now advising on that lockdown. And he said that this is a decision that's not being taken from a single perspective of a specific expert. So the medical folks are advising, the human security folks are advising, the national security folks are advising. All of that will come together on a decision that should actually be taken. But again, back to the expectation with the Minister for Finance, Ken Ofori-Atta, you would recall that he was in Parliament sometime last week to update MPs on what is being done to help keep the economy in shape, even as the coronavirus spreads, and made disclosures on the $100 million that has been sought from the IMF, the World Bank, and other institutions. The specific indication we get is that tomorrow, it's very likely, that's not been fully confirmed, but that's the hint that we're getting, that he will be in the House specifically to update members of Parliament on that particular situation and how far Ghana has gone with raising money, and also make MPs aware of the necessary measures to keep the economy going as far as the situation with the coronavirus scare is concerned. So it's a broad conversation he's expected to have with Parliament tomorrow on the conversation around lockdown and helping keep the economy in shape, even in the light of the spread of the coronavirus.
Right. Now, in Parliament, of course, James Agalga is one of a number of people who is calling for a lockdown. The President, when he received the Finance Minister's document, raised the fact that many factors must be considered in this. For those who are calling for a lockdown, have they been providing suggestions on how it should be done?
James Agalga makes the point that this is a situation where it's about prioritizing human life and making that the most important thing in the equation and the conversation, and that looking at the numbers that are coming up as far as this particular spread is concerned, it's an option that's available for government in terms of how to deal with it, containing humans in specific locations so that then we won't see a situation of the virus moving from one point to the other. He makes the point that these are not decisions that should just be taken simply and then rolled out, but then necessary consultation should be done with state security agencies, the police, various other agencies, so that then all other things in terms of providing basic amenities are still put in place rightly, even as the lockdown comes into place. So that's kind of the idea that Mr. Agalga is offering, that a holistic approach to any possible lockdown that will not just be a security-focused issue, but then involving various different sectors of the economy and other experts, so that then Ghanaians are not hit badly, even as the lockdown comes into being.
How is Parliament itself continuing to deal with this outbreak? We know that their numbers were drastically reduced in terms of attendance. Some of them were wearing masks. Anything changed on that front?
So this is a conversation that's actually happening not on the floor of Parliament. So the point about a lockdown and the economic assessment that the Finance Minister will be presenting, and the conversation around the request by James Agalga for amnesty when it comes to prisoners, which I'm sure we'll get back to a little later, is actually a conversation that's happening outside Parliament, specifically with members of Parliament, including James Agalga and Kojo Nkrumah. On the floor itself, that conversation regarding COVID-19 has actually not come up. MPs continue to wear their mask even as they undertake their business. Earlier in the day, the Minister for Works and Housing, Samuel Atachian, was on the floor of Parliament to respond to questions about sea defense wall in the Ada area, as well as housing projects for various institutions. The Energy Minister, Peter Mbeu, was also on the floor of Parliament to respond to questions on rural electrification projects that are ongoing in the South Dai constituency and other areas. And with regard to that, he gave a hint that they were expecting to extend electricity to some areas in South Dai that they had a deadline of December 2020. But in the light of the COVID-19, this is something that could possibly negatively be impacted, and the timelines may move back a little. So that broad conversation on other things apart from COVID-19 is happening on the floor of Parliament. MPs are wearing their masks. The numbers are reduced drastically. Earlier in the day, I counted well about 40 to 50 MPs on the floor, even as business was being undertaken. A while ago, they went into a committee of a whole sitting to discuss how the National Health Insurance Fund should be disbursed, and the House is currently on suspension. We are expecting them to return sometime after 4 p.m. to consider other businesses, including the corporate insolvency bill. So the numbers are down drastically. MPs are still wearing their masks even as they go around their duties, and they are on a break at the moment to return sometime after 4 p.m. Kojo.
Right, now let's talk about James Agalga's call for an amnesty of sorts in order to decongest our prisons. It's an ongoing conversation. Many have contributed to it, calling on government to act swiftly to prevent a catastrophe in our prisons. What in particular is James Agalga's concern here?
James Agalga referenced Seth Kwame Boateng's documentary Logged and Forgotten that showed a lot of congestion in a lot of the prisons. He indicated that the number of people in the prisons are 50% more than the expected figure that should be in there, and he thinks that it's one of the most dangerous places, that if we see the coronavirus spread there, the situation could be very dire. So he says that the last time the president used his prerogative as president to grant amnesty to prisoners was 10 days after he was sworn into power as president back in January 2017, and he thinks now is the best time for him to apply that prerogative and go ahead and grant amnesty to prisoners. He was specific that people who may be petty offenders, who may have engaged in acts that are not exactly very detrimental to the state, are people that the state should consider pardoning. And he says that it's about time that the president acted very swiftly and got as much of them out of the prisons as possible, so that then those who have been involved in very hardened criminal activities are the ones who are left there. Otherwise, with what is happening, if the virus spreads there, then the country would be in trouble. I did see clarity on that from the Information Minister, Kojo Nkrumah, as to what government makes of this particular suggestion. And he says this is something that has actually come to the attention of President Akufo-Addo. The president gave a directive to the Interior Minister, Ambrose Derry, to assess and evaluate and come back with a report on the feasibility or otherwise of that particular suggestion. And sometime soon, Ambrose Derry will submit that report to the president for a decision to be taken. I asked him about timelines on when Ambrose Derry will submit that particular report to the president. He says those specific details cannot be given, but government is really considering that option, and the nation would know more soon.
Right, I think it's important to clarify here. Earlier we were talking about the Information Minister's comments, and he did say that the economic impact of any new measures are being considered. Obviously, government has a number of options in terms of measures to take. A lockdown is only one possible measure, and so just to clarify that, yes, whichever measures the government decides to take, they are interested in the economic impact of those measures, and that's what the finance minister has been assessing in that document. All right, now, Joseph, does Mr. Agalga have any intention of making a statement on the floor of Parliament to further his call on the president regarding decongestion of prisons?
Well, he says for now it's a conversation that he's bringing up and getting the nation to talk about and drawing attention to if other steps become necessary in terms of trying to get the information out and to get that particular request escalated. He will do that in due course.
The Information Minister, Kojo Nkrumah, mentioned that there is some $30 million facility being accessed from the World Bank Were there any more details on that?
From the information minister himself, no, but that's something that the details of which have actually been brought to Parliament by the finance minister himself. He indicates that it's actually a $35 million facility. It's coming at a 0% interest rate. It's money that's coming to the country, and the country would have up to 5 years before beginning repayment of that particular facility. And this is something that the World Bank is giving to various nations that have been impacted negatively by the spread of the coronavirus, and that the necessary applications have actually gone out to the World Bank requesting for that particular funding, and they are awaiting feedback and possible release of the amount sometime soon.
Do we know whether there are any conditionalities attached to it?
From the clarification that came from the finance minister and his deputy, Charles Boahene, when they offered those details to Parliament, the money is not coming with any conditionalities. It's coming at interest-free. It's not coming with any other requirements. You just have to be a country that's been hit by the coronavirus spread, and the indication is that any amount that's been given you will be just around 1% of your GDP, which is how come Ghana had to stick with a specific figure of about $35 million. And he indicated that beyond that, beyond the World Bank, they're considering money from the IMF as well as the Stabilization Fund as part of efforts to keep the economy running appropriately, even in the light of the spread of the virus.
Joseph Opoku-Gakpo, I want to thank you once again for your time and for that extensive, comprehensive update from Parliament. We appreciate it. All right, let's keep going. Now, as a quarter of the world's population is put on lockdown, proposals for Ghana to do the same have been met with mixed reactions. The latest to have waded into this debate is a research scientist at KNUST's Department of Medical Diagnostics. Now, he argues that government should rather identify and lock down the epicenters in the country instead of a nationwide lockdown. Already, the country has recorded 68 confirmed cases with 4 deaths. Actually, that number has increased since then. It's over 100 confirmed cases now. But it is time for a lockdown. Is it time for a lockdown? Sorry. Here's a report capturing all of the arguments from experts on whether or not a total lockdown is necessary.
Is government considering a lockdown? Let me say that all options are on the table. All options are on the table. Government continues to receive advice which is subjected to analysis by the
Information Minister Kojo Nkrumah announcing government will only take action after experts speak. But the health experts are divided. The first to have called for a gradual lockdown is the senior research fellow at Noguchi Memorial Institute for Medical Research, Dr. Kofi Boni.
We can do a gradual looking at essential workers, maybe working electricity, water and all that. They can be going. And even that one, we can cut down the numbers because people are taking public transport. That is the issue. I'm thinking we can do it gradually, this lockdown, starting with essential workers, those that we really need, they should go. And those that we can do without for a period of time should stay at home.
The Ghana Medical Association agrees with Dr. Boni, except they want it to be taken with immediate effect.
Now, the question we should ask ourselves, do we want to go to the levels of Italy, Spain, and the likes before we try to break the chain of transmission, or we do it now and save our healthcare system? We have a system or a health system that is not as robust as that of others. We also are not in control of medical supplies because most of them are actually brought into the country from elsewhere. And at this crucial point in time, where virtually every country is actually trying to mobilize them all that they can to fix their own COVID-19 problems, it has become imperative that we take these measures to contain the spread of the disease now.
Again, another aspect, this time a virologist with the Kumasi Center for Research into Tropical Medicine, Dr. Michael Owusu, says the approach proposed by the GMA is wrong.
If you close the country down and you don't have variables to measure the success of your close down, then we cannot predict when to close down and how long to close down and what will be the end result of this. So for me, the first is that you must know the exact burden of the disease at the community level. It is the community cases that sparks outbreak. So once you understand the burden of the case, you can lock it down. And whilst lockdown is ongoing, you still test. You still do mass testing. Then you expect that the cases that report to your hospitals or the number of tests will tell you the prevalence change after lockdown or within lockdown and before lockdown is what will tell you that you are being successful.
These are all health experts, but they are not the only ones making arguments. Community NGOs are also kicking against a total lockdown as they fear the slums will be greatly affected.
Lockdown? Well, yes, the best approach to fight the coronavirus head-on, according to some experts. However, are we ready as a country? Do we have the resources to support a lockdown? Do we have the money? Do we have a plan? Have we factored in the most vulnerable people who depend on daily wage, daily gifts, people with low income, no savings, very little savings that can last only a few days? Have we considered what will happen to street children, street workers, homeless people? Well, we're going to have a conversation on that with the human rights perspective at the forefront. And of course, the People's Dialogue on Human Settlement are going to be here with us for that. Before that, though, let's take a look at how people in the slums are struggling with social distancing as experts continue to advocate a lockdown. Maxwell Agbagba has been in conversation with some residents of Jamestown.
Well, the streets here at Jamestown never goes to sleep. It is a close-knit society with majority of the people in the informal sector. We've heard in sections of the media that government may impose restrictions to curtail possible community spread of the coronavirus. But what will restrictions mean for a community like Jamestown? What would a lockdown mean for a community like Jamestown with majority of its people working in the informal sector? We've been speaking to some of the residents here at Jamestown.
The lockdown means, how do you call it? The implementation will be good for us. But the thing is, due to financial circumstances, because I have it, somebody don't have it. Fellow have to rush and go and come back before get something to eat or feed his family. You have children, you have wife, either your family. Let's say, let me put it that way, family. If you are not going, are they going to cope? The government have to look at it. You know, social distancing here. Let's say it should be, as for here, it should be difficult for us. We know you have to care of yourself, take care. Yeah, prevention. That will be best to us.
But do you think you can do social distancing?
Here, it will be difficult.
If there's a lockdown, it will pose inconvenience to us. I go on fishing. When I come back, I bring fish. I can get some condo when I return. There is pepper. I can prepare food and eat with my wife and children. But if there's a lockdown, how can we go about our normal duties? Our children will be hungry. The government must take a second look at the suggestions. If the government finally decides to impose a lockdown, it must support us with food for our wives and children.
A
lockdown will bring starvation. It will bring a lot of problems. Government should take another look at the suggestions and the possibility of helping us with some money if it finally decides to impose a lockdown.
If the
lockdown happens, we do not know what we eat with our wives and children. If the government can give us some financial support before any imposition of a lockdown, that will be fine. We have been told to use hand sanitizers. We do not have money to buy them. They asked us to use soaps. We do not have the money. The tap is also not flowing. Where we get our water is far from here. But if we will get some form of support from government, we can agree on the lockdown. I'm a tailor. I've not been to work the whole of this week.
Right now, the executive director for People's Dialogue on Human Settlement, Farouk Rabiu Brima, joins me via Skype now. Now, he doesn't agree with the calls for a lockdown, but let's find out why. Hello, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm fine, and you?
Not bad at all. I'm glad to speak to you. Now, you've been on the ground, you've been interacting with people, and your conclusion is that a lockdown is not the way forward. Tell us why.
Thank you so much. I think at this stage, it's not about right or wrong. We are not against a lockdown, not at all. Lockdown is appropriate if the timing is right. I think the problem has to do with what just my colleague from Jamestown just articulated. You see, we have very peculiar challenges in some communities, and I think we should just prepare ourselves properly, some form of targeting, some geographical targeting, to identify communities that are mostly going to be affected by this and prepare them before the lockdown. I think that's exactly our call.
That's a fascinating thought. So you think that under the right circumstances, a lockdown would be okay. But what would those circumstances be?
Okay. Let me just give a typical scenario. You have a community like Old Fadama, where you have about 120 people living in that area. You have about 20,000 households, and people live 8, 10 in a room. The place is overcrowded. They have a very communal lifestyle. They share toilets, they share baths, they share their rooms, and they share their eating spaces. Now, these kinds of communal living makes lockdown and isolation practically difficult. It doesn't mean that it is not possible. So I'm just saying, what we're saying is that let's begin to have this conversation. Let's act. We need a lot of data. We need household data. We need data about communities. We need to find out how many people, how many children, how many women, what is the family size, so we can plan an intervention. We feel strongly that once we are able to identify these hotspots and the flashpoints, and we intervene, if I say we, I'm being very careful not to place the responsibility on government alone. Government alone can never do this. So again, government has a lot of activity to do at the macro level. The research, the facilities, the hospitals, and paying people on the ground, government is already overburdened at the top. Non-state actors, yes, please?
No, please go ahead.
So we expect that all hands must be on deck. The non-state actors must come in, the international NGOs must come in, the local NGOs must come in, the private sector must come in. We cannot sit back and expect government to move into communities and provide everything to households. That would not work. And so I'm just saying that, sitting from where I sit and what we have been doing in the communities, we've started a very simple, non-expensive approach. There are two approaches here. We have the hardware component side of the program and the software side of the problem. I think we're focusing too much on the hardware, which comes with capital cost. Our proposal is that we should have a community-led response and management to this problem. What does it entail? You need to set up community structures where they have a certain leadership who can then coordinate and interface with national efforts. Fancy that government wants to give 100 sanitizers to Choco. How are they going to distribute it as we sit? So we need to, first of all, put in place the software component. Let's have community structures. Let's have community coordinators. Let's have volunteers. Once you begin to create those structures, from outside, communities look homogeneous. But when you move in, there are differences and stratification. So we are just proposing that let's begin to look at low-hanging fruits. There are quick impact programs that we all can get ourselves onto. Every Ghanaian, the president has shown the way. He has called every Ghanaian to take personal responsibility. And I think that is enough.
Right.
We have seen personal commitment from government. And I was so impressed, my brother, yesterday, the day before in Old Fadama, when I had to encounter the Minister for Local Government. She walked into the community. We had a one-on-one with her. I could see commitment. I saw Honorable Atechia with us. We were with Honorable Nitiwu in the community, and that was so interesting. Now, these kinds of commitments and interventions would all spur people on to contribute their quota. Please let us not sit on the fence.
Mr. Brahma, let me ask you this. What you're describing, this sort of software approach, where there is a need for community representation. Permit me to ask, does that not already exist? Don't we have assemblymen? Don't we have district administrative structures? And then further up, we have regional and so forth. Is the structure already not in existence? Can we not use that?
Thank you so much. We need to enrich. There are some structures existing, but we need to enrich the process. We are in a very difficult time, and I think we're beginning to misunderstand where we find ourselves currently. This is not the traditional emergency response approaches. This is not the traditional disaster response approaches. Why am I saying this? I think we are very familiar with the conventional mitigation framework. You mitigate, you prepare yourself, you respond, and then you recover. This doesn't allow that to happen. Why? Because if you want to deliver water, you are also avoiding events that amplifies transmission. So you cannot expect people to move in their numbers and congregate to access water. If it were just a normal emergency situation, you could just go in to deliver sanitizers, and people would queue to take it. We don't want to encourage conditions that will amplify the disease transmission. And so we are in very difficult times. We need social workers, community development officers must all move on the field, work with very vulnerable communities that are on risk. Let's identify these communities. Let's break them into clusters and begin to assist them in a way that we don't increase the spread of this disease. The assembly members, the unit committee members, the local authorities have been up and doing. We have to commend them. I can see people who really are committed to work. Again, we need logistics.
So
we have to encourage.
What you're describing is a sort of a system that will allow for pretty much door-to-door access to citizens, to provide them with whatever they need, to test them where necessary, to monitor a lockdown, if that were to be the option chosen by government. Now, what you're saying is that a lack of data makes that difficult. It almost sounds like this would have been a perfect time for us to have a census. Is that an option?
Not at all. I think some data exists. I need to say clearly, given where I sit, we're working in collaboration with the Zongo Development Fund, which was created to provide funds and support processes like this in communities. In fact, we are talking about social protection here. Now, for those of us who are practitioners in the field, social protection would only mean a public action that is meant to respond to a level of deprivation or risk, or vulnerability, which is deemed unacceptable. And we are saying that these conditions we find in the slums and zongos are unacceptable. That is one. Two, we are saying that the government and the ministries and agencies cannot go the full stream from the top right to community and households. And so there's a need for a certain connection. The assembly members, the unit committee members are on the ground, but we still need to create a certain system that allows a plug-and-play approach. So the government has to have a certain structure in the community that they can easily interface with, and that's exactly what we're proposing.
All right.
We are also saying here clearly, my brother, that the Ghana Water Company Limited must speed up its process of supplies of water. The low-income community support unit must be up and doing. They have to be supported to provide water. We are looking at the National Food Basket, NAFCO, to also intensify whether we're going to have some food balance in communities. We have to start thinking around this. We are talking about data. What are we doing about the price data networks? Are we going to ask them to reduce the price of data so that we can have more of the virtual interaction that we are pushing?
Yeah.
So these are things that are very low-hanging. I think we should begin to embrace them.
Now, you've touched on a number of things. You've touched on utilities when you mentioned water and perhaps even toilets and so forth. You've also touched on the economic aspect of things. There is one aspect yet to be mentioned, and that's security. We know what happened in Jordan. They literally had to claw back their lockdown because security issues started to raise their heads. Now, let me ask you, from what you know of the way things are organized at the community level, and from what you know about our massive shortage of police officers, how would we even go about enforcing a lockdown and ensuring the security of all aspects of society while this lockdown remains for 14 or 21 days?
Oh, I think if you listen to my earlier submission, 3 things must happen. I feel strongly that at the community level, we need to create certain structures, okay? The existing structures are not able to, they are not fit for purpose. We need to enrich them. What do I mean by enriching? Remember that we find ourselves in a very polarized environment. Political parties, religions, tribes, ethnic, we are divided somehow. They are not so deep, but you have some divisions. Now you need a certain platform that allows all people, all manner of people and persons to work together towards the fight against COVID. And we feel strongly that that has to happen. And that's what we call the community coordinating committees. We need to have community coordinating centers. You know, it's very critical. Elsewhere, they call them the disease incident systems, okay? So that when people want to complain, they want to talk to people, they should know a central location in the community that you can reach out. It could be the assembly member's office, it could be the unit committee member.
But if we're on lockdown, we can't do that. If we're on lockdown and there's mandatory quarantine, you can't go to an office to you know, make a complaint, can you? Okay, virtual office.
Virtual space.
Can all Ghanaians access a virtual office?
But that is why we are saying that the social workers, community development workers, environmental health officers, and even the community volunteers, we have to dirty our hands. And I'm saying this because if we continue to expect just the trauma system to respond to this, we're going to be in serious crisis. I happen to have worked somehow in Liberia and Sierra Leone during the Ebola crisis. And I bet you, my brother, the slums and the highly populated areas were badly hit when Ebola found its way there. This is the kind of things we want to preempt. And so my motivation at this time and what I'm sharing on is that let's begin to build the structures and the capacities of the first responders, who are community people. Now, they have to work in tandem and under the supervision of the environmental health officers. We can train community leaders. We can train community volunteers. You cannot expect 60 environmental officers to be everywhere at any time, 24/7 in the whole of Accra. It's not going to work.
Is there time for that? I mean, we're talking about fast action here. We're seeing what's happening in other parts of the world where the numbers are multiplying exponentially. We want to try and prevent that. Is there time for training and capacity building and all of that before we actually take action?
I think training in this sense is also training within an emergency sense. So we are not discussing the workshop approach to training. This is taking the necessary precautionary measures away from the offices into the communities and tell community leaders that, look, you have this sense of urgency. There's appetite to work, but there is no agency to work. So you have a situation where people have the urgency and then they don't have the agency. So the environmental officers, professionals, could partner. And that's what we do in Ofadama. We have zoned the area into 6. For every 5 volunteers, we have 1 or 2 professionals working with them. And we feel that's the kind of approach that would bring total crash of this. In terms of the timing, I've listened to the debate, and I think they are mutually inclusive. Nobody is talking about which is right and which is wrong under these circumstances. I think what we should do is to begin to tackle this head on. Let's do them simultaneously. You are beginning to have a close down. Let's have a quick, rapid response to how are we going to handle such communities who will require some support. And I propose geographical targeting. Because the government and the state can never, and we cannot expect the state to provide meals, soap, water for every household in Ghana. It is not going to work.
Okay.
So first,
well, hopefully not every household will need that. So perhaps you're right. But I want you to stay with me because we're joined on the phone by Dr. Donald Agumenu. He's Executive Director for Water for Rural Africa. Now, they are in support of a total lockdown. He's on the phone now. Dr. Agumenu, I've got to say, you would not have been the first person I would guess to support a total lockdown, considering how much you know about the lack of basic utilities like water. How can we practicalize a lockdown when even the Ghana Water Company is warning us that we need to ration water?
Yes, thank you. And I use this opportunity to wish all the listeners and the entire public the peace of God, the love of God, and safety. Talking about this situation, we're actually in difficult times. This is not like a business as usual. Whichever way we look at the approaches or the strategies, I don't think we can have 100% situation. That notwithstanding, we need to take some strong measures. And I must say that what the leadership has put in place so far, so good. What is important, especially when it comes to water, already we have water scarcity across the country and that of Africa. So it's important at this moment for even the private sector, not only government. For instance, if you look at a company like Zoom Lion, they've been at the forefront of sanitation. This is the time for them to deploy the resources they have to providing water to especially the affected communities. Because if water is actually the central thing for washing hands, keeping our environment clean, and even having a healthy life, what about rural communities without water? Some don't even have the water to drink or clean water to drink, moreover talking about washing of hands. So all hands must come on board for us to fight this thing as a common enemy. So when it comes to lockdown, it is a complex thing. We may not necessarily have to do it in 100% way. We have to ration it, if I will put it that way, because, for instance, when you look at the three epicenters, Accra, Tema, Kumasi, the approach is how can we look at key issues. For instance, you go to the major malls. How sure are we that even the containers, the cans, the foods that we buy are not are safe or are not infested? So it's very important for us to see all these things and now see, assuming we lock up those shops, what are we going to do? Do we have water in the homes? Do we have food in the homes? Then that is where the private sector and the public sector would come in. And I believe that a lot is going on when it comes to the strategic formulations to tackle this very situation. So
let me ask you about this, Dr. Agumenu, if you don't mind. Let's even assume that there isn't a shortage of water from the Ghana Water Company. Let's assume that that's not a problem to worry about. Just the structure of our communities poses a challenge to a lockdown. We have compound houses that have about 20, 30 rooms. Each one has about 70 people in it, and they are sharing 2 public toilets, and the landlord has locked one of them for his family. All right, the rest of them are sharing the other. You've got, about 12.5% of this country that are sharing taps, even if the water is flowing. You've got an 81% community that doesn't have, access to public toilets. So how do you lock down a country that has this sort of structure at the bottom? How, practically?
Okay, this approach is not new. And in crisis time like this, we need to look at a two-sided approach of it. Number one, I may not be 100% correct, but you and I can agree that we cannot have a 100% situation like I said earlier. If you live in a home where you have a compound house, they all share the same facility. This is crisis time. We need to manage it. That is why it's important for us to quickly, in some countries, people started buying toilet rolls. Why? Because they know that this is what we are moving into. So if we want to have 100% satisfactory solution in place before we implement a specific approach, we may fail at the end of the day.
So what would an 80% satisfactory or 70% satisfactory solution look like?
70% satisfactory, I think, is achievable. Number one, see, as we speak now, the transport system is partially shut down, and it's for good. Nobody is hustling. Nobody is feeling it bad, because at the end of the day, they understand that this is a critical issue, and we all have to adhere to government protocols for our own safety. And they are not complaining. The only thing is, we know that it's going to stress everybody, but it's for good. So can we try it at least for a week, if not 2 weeks, to see how it's going to work?
Dr. Agumenu, I've got to thank you. I apologize so much, because there's a lot we can learn from you. I think we need to have another of these conversations. But for now, Dr. Donald Agumenu is with Water for Rural Africa. Thank you so much for joining us. On Skype, we also had the Executive Director for People's Dialogue on Human Settlement, Mr. Farouk Rabiu Brima. Mr. Brima, we want to thank you too for your time. Much appreciated. Now, my colleague, Hannah Odame, has also been finding out from petty traders what their survival strategy would be if government decided to explore the option of a lockdown. Now, most of them say they'll be hungry.
The head porter, the cobbler, the rubbish collector, and many alike all rely on their daily income to enable them to put food on the table, as well as cater for their families. Should there be a lockdown in Ghana as a result of COVID-19? What will be their survival strategy? That is what I have set out to find today.
We are water distributor. I'm at today, I'm going to say, 50 ABI, 50 next week. May lockdown. But maybe, you know, the new president in Yabi. This is a lockdown about. In your service of a dinner, you need to be. Maybe it's not a fear, maybe it's not a fear. He
is saying that he has heard there might be a possible lockdown, but he does not agree to that decision. Why? Because first, he is married with children, and there is no way he can stock food to enable them get fed during the period of the lockdown. He adds that he is a water distributor, and a lot of communities in the Greater Accra region do not have access to potable water. And so he has to distribute the water to be able to fend for himself, and the people who do not have access to water can also have access to water through this. Should there be a lockdown, he's asking, how will the people get access to water, and how can he also get his daily bread? Lockdown, I say yo, lockdown.
For me, I'm not well prepared for now. But Sabani critical, I have to get prepared because I'm a situation I am. Abano. But you want me and prepare no say. Maybe I say 1 month, 2 months. On to fear, on back room, on my 20 no new scanning ABI and the bush on the end of it. Then I bind the bay I found.
According to her, she may be able to survive a lockdown, but her concern is for families who will not be able to do so. She is therefore asking authorities in charge to at least find another solution, another option, rather than a lockdown. The coconut seller is saying that he fully supports a lockdown, but he has some concerns. What are they? He thinks that a lockdown will mean no daily bread because he has to sell coconuts on a daily basis to be able to fend for himself and his family.
Okay, I lock it down. I better make a crack say. When I'm a dish, I am quite and to say a cosset de moi. Media ebehami, but ehami bebre say ya de boy ho ban.
So Auntie Mansa is saying that for her, she may be affected, but not so greatly, because she may be able to at least sustain herself and her family for some days or some weeks. Government, these are the concerns of your people in case you are considering a lockdown. For Joy News, I am Hannah Odame.
All right, in a moment, I'm going to take you all around the world to find out what COVID-19 has been doing to other countries. We'll spend a bit of time in the UK, among other nations. Stay with us for that and more right here on The Pulse. Now, the United States has almost 70,000 confirmed cases and at least 1,050 deaths. But New York State, the worst affected, says social restrictions are slowing hospital admissions. U.S. Senate has passed a $2 trillion stimulus bill, which includes $1,200 for most adults. Now, in the UK, financial support for the self-employed is due to be unveiled. The number of deaths in the UK has risen to 465 out of 9,500 confirmed cases. Let's see what else we can learn about the UK situation. Joining me on Skype from there is Oroyo Eubanks. He's a resident of London. Oroyo, I hope I've said your name right. Forgive me if I haven't. But thank you for your time with us.
You're welcome. You actually did.
Thank goodness.
Good job.
Thank goodness. All right. So, I mean, tell me, as an average Londoner, how has life changed since COVID-19 became part of your reality?
It changed drastically. The social distancing measures took effect earlier this week, where more restrictions were announced by the government. Travel restrictions, you can only go outdoors once if you're going to do an exercise, or if you're going for essential items to the supermarket or to the pharmacy, or if you have to travel to work and cannot work from home. So life has changed drastically for most of us living in London, especially. Those of us who are used to nightlife, for instance, the stop put to that last weekend. So I think last Friday night was the last that pubs or cinemas were able to be opened to the public. And so that has been, I think, the most drastic change, and that was implemented 6 days ago.
Now, one of the things that we struggle to imagine is what social distancing will look like on public transport. How in God's name do you do social distancing on the Jubilee line?
That's a very good one. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to witness that in action because I've been in self-isolation for the last 13 days. But I cannot see as well how they are able to enforce social distancing on any of the underground lines that are, in full operation. They're still in full operation in London. But what I've been seeing is that they're asking people to, as best as possible, try not to take these underground lines or try not to take the bus. You work from home, they've been enforcing. But if you have to, then I think there's less people on the underground. So you're able to maybe sit in just one of those carriages by yourself, and that may be the social distancing practices that are taking place now on the underground.
Now, there was a bit of concern when recently the statistics showed that most of those who are hospitalized are actually young adults. How does that make you feel in particular? And has anybody come up with an explanation for that?
None that I've seen, no explanation that I've seen, but you are correct. A lot of those who have been hospitalized, especially since the virus surged in recent times, have been young people, which is contrary to what we've been told before, we became into a pandemic stage for the virus, that a lot of young people who are fit and healthy will not be so affected by the virus. So that came as a shocker, and I think it helped to create a lot more anxiety and panic amongst the population, and coupled with the fact that many of those young people were not being tested, so would have not been showing any sign or symptoms of the virus for days. and not aware that they have the virus. And of course, that caused it to spread more rapidly amongst your social networks and your friends and families.
Tell me about the practicality of mass testing. How easy is it to get tested for COVID-19? If you, for example, wanted to do so, what process would you go through?
Right now, the process is to call the hotline that's been set up by the National Health Service, the NHS, which is 111. You go through a process of answering some questions about how you're feeling, what symptoms you're having, and if they deem you to be having severe symptoms, then you can get tested. What they're continuously saying to people is stay home. So if you experience any symptoms of the coronavirus, they're asking you not to turn up to a general practice, a doctor's office, or to the hospital, but stay home and live out those symptoms. To be honest, I think it's still very difficult for anyone to get tested. People I know would have walked into a drop-in center or to a hospital before we are at the stage and would have been able to get tested. Right now, I think they're looking at mass testing. I don't know how that's going to roll out when more people are, at home and are being told to stay home if they have any sort of symptom. I don't know how it's going to work in London because it is now at the point where most people are saying, I cannot get tested, so I'm just going to stay home and live out the symptoms.
Now, your Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, announced that as part of the measures to be enforced will be some sort of stimulus package, about over £3.5 billion. What are some of the things that this money is going to be spent on, and who are the ones benefiting from it?
Good question. We're hoping that it will benefit much of the population. I think there are some concerns that it will, of course, benefit larger businesses. But I think the idea is that the stimulus package that's been announced, it will cushion the effect that the coronavirus will have on the population, especially for those who will find themselves unemployed. And so the provision has been made to help businesses to be in a position where they won't have to lay off staff. So the government has put in place a plan where if you have to be laid off, they will pay up to 80% of your salary, up to £2,500 per month. And that will be in place for the next 3 months. And that will be for persons, as I've said, who would have no work to do during this period, and so their companies have no choice but to lay them off. Right. Now, the government has provided a grant to companies in the case that they have to do that, where they will pay those employees, and then in turn, they won't have to lay those employees off. But if you've been laid off, then you can apply for that grant as an individual from the government. And so companies also have the opportunity to apply for that grant as well. So we're hoping it will benefit a wide cross-section of the population. A lot of people are anxious about this time, the uncertainty over the next couple of months, whether they'll still be in jobs or their companies will still be able to pay them. And so for a lot of those people, this is a good measure that was announced by the government this week.
Now, here in Ghana, there are constant calls for this issue of COVID-19 not to be politicized. It's a life and death thing, not a politics thing for most people. Now, I know that there were similar calls in the United Kingdom, particularly when Boris Johnson came under quite a lot of criticism for not having acted on time. How is the politics being balanced against this national emergency?
I think kudos. We've seen less of the politicking about it now. In the earlier days, I think rightly so, the Prime Minister was criticized for what was considered the phased approach that he continuously said the UK was taking towards coronavirus. And of course, brandishing this herd immunity concept that his advisors were saying were going to be taken. And I know that a lot of the plans that he had were criticized by the Labour Party. The Labour Party, which is now in a leadership kind of contest. So a lot of those persons contesting for leadership positions in the Labour Party now had different views about what the plans the Prime Minister was supposed to be taking for coronavirus. Suffice it to say that today, I think some of those suggestions, especially to help the self-employed and to help people who are living on the streets, were suggested by the Labour Party in the last couple of weeks and were taken on board by this government. So, which is why I said right now, a lot of the politicking is kind of dying down, and I'm seeing a lot more support from both sides of the House, because this is an issue that is affecting everyone. And so many MPs have tested positive for coronavirus, and I think they're showing solidarity because they've also been affected. And so, gladly so, not so much politics going around.
That's a relief. Now, let's talk about you, Oroyo. You've been on self-quarantine, if you will, for about a fortnight now? Okay.
Yes. Yes.
But your housemate has tested positive for COVID-19, am I right?
Yes, you're correct.
What was that like? How long ago did this happen?
Scary at first. My housemate tested positive 14 days ago for coronavirus. He just had severe, not severe symptoms, but he just had a high fever, was at work, and had the opportunity to walk to a walk-in center close by. And then they did a few tests, and it came back the following day that he had the coronavirus. Thankfully, he's fully recovered now and is in very good health. And I think throughout the week, once we learned that he was tested positive, we jumped right away to enforce some isolation measures amongst ourselves, and to also do as best as possible to clean up and stuff around the house, so that I would not be able to pick up the virus. And we did very well. I've not been affected. I'm free from many symptoms, and I've also been put in isolation for 14 days, which ends tomorrow. And so far, I've not seen any sign or symptom of being infected by coronavirus. So we've done very well.
Trust me when I say we're all very happy for you, but it can't have been easy managing a friend, a housemate, who you literally had to quarantine. I'm guessing you kept him alone in his room?
We tried our best. We tried our best, but it's very hard, like you've said, to live in the same house where what we separate is a room, so we still have to share a bathroom and a kitchen. So I mean, just cleaning up as we go along was the order of the day. Hard as it was, but we did our best, and I can gladly say that we have been successful in the efforts to contain it in our own household.
Oroyo, it's been such a delight talking to you. Thank you so much for that, and let's do it again soon. Yeah, Oroyo Eubanks there giving us an update on what life is like in the United Kingdom with coronavirus ravaging many parts of that country. Now, the WHO is meanwhile warning countries of tougher times ahead. Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus says that countries must increase community surveillance.
To slow the spread of COVID-19, many countries have contributed or introduced unprecedented measures at significant social and economic cost, closing schools and businesses, cancelling sporting events, and asking people to stay home and stay safe. We understand that these countries are now trying to assess when and how they will be able to ease these measures. The answer depends on what countries do while these population-wide measures are in place. Asking people to stay at home and shutting down population movement is buying time and reducing the pressure on health systems. But on their own, these measures will not extinguish epidemics. The point of these actions is to enable the more precise and targeted measures that are needed to stop transmission and save lives. We call on all countries who have introduced so-called lockdown measures to use this time to attack the virus.
Right. Now, all over the globe, there are calls for support to assist governments as COVID-19 continues to wreak havoc on human lives. Now, the WHO emphasized the need for people to support individuals, communities, health facilities that are struggling with basic needs. Right here in Ghana, frontline health workers are calling for support. The Ghana Association of Doctors in Residency say Ghanaians must come to their rescue as they run out of essential equipment to work with. Joining me on Skype is Dr. Bernard Hammond. He's the president of the Ghana Association of Doctors in Residency. Dr. Hammond, thank you very much for your time with us. Help us understand the reality of your situation. No PPE at all?
Okay, thank you very much for having me too. Now we are taking, when we take stock, okay, we had some PPEs, but there are also facilities scattered across the country where they don't have at all. Just yesterday, a friend of mine also called me. He's from somewhere in the OT region. He mans a facility over there. There is no PPE. His facility, his town shares a border with Togo, which we have people just crossing the border to come and seek healthcare at his facility.
Right. Now, just as you're with us, let me also introduce our other guest who joins us on Skype. Two Ghanaians who are capitalizing on the power of social media to reach thousands of Ghanaians and show them love in these trying times. The two friends are Derek Laye, who's a technology enthusiast, and Selom Brantier of Imani. He's the vice president there. And they are reaching out to Ghanaians to help them to support healthcare facilities. Derek joins me on Skype now. Oh, there you are. Good old Derek. Hello. And hello to you, Doc, as well. Nice to see you both.
Hi, Kojo.
Hi, Derek.
Hi.
Now, I'm really excited by what you and Selom are trying to do. But just before we learn about the details, let's hear a bit more about the problem from Doc. So what you're saying is that right now, the problem is not just with those who are on the front line treating COVID-19, but doctors across all facilities have a need for support, right? Paint the picture for us.
Yes. So don't limit it to
Hello, Doc. I'm hoping you can hear us.
With nurses, working with other staff. Yes, I can hear you.
Wonderful. Please continue.
Hello?
Yes, please continue.
Yes. So you have doctors working with nurses, working with other staff. They are all on the front line. And so the shortage or the absence of the PPEs is not just limited to doctors. And secondly, they are designated COVID centers. I mean, in Accra, in the Greater Accra region, you have Greater Accra Regional Hospital, that is RIG, and you also have Tema General. In Kumasi, you have basically Kumasi South, serving as a hub for all of activities concerning COVID. But our patients don't just get up when they start feeling the symptoms, they run to these centers. Definitely they will pass through some facilities before being suspected and getting to these centers. So at all these places, we need to ensure that there is some minimum number of personal protective equipment available for the frontline health workers to use. For instance, basically, what most people do is that when they start feeling these symptoms, they run to the nearest private hospital that is close by. And if the staff at this private hospital don't have these equipment to protect themselves, you end up exposing all of them there, and you are going to this is going to result in a shutdown of the facility because of the staff being isolated. So the focus is not, or the target is not just the COVID.
Right. I think you've made your point quite well, Doc. And I really get the picture of the situation out there. Now, Derek, what have you and Selom been up to exactly, and how are you playing Good Samaritan in this situation?
Hi, Kojo. Thanks for the opportunity to share. So Selom is a very good friend. He reached out to me a couple of days ago, let's say about 10 days ago. And he thought that, look, what could we do to support these health workers? Because we're getting a lot of feedback, a lot of messages from our brothers and our sisters, our aunties and mothers who are all over the country, saying that they do not have the required equipment to be able to face this pandemic. And you understand clearly what this means. It's the situation appears to be one that looks like
it breaks my heart to have to do this, Derek. It's unbelievable, but I'm being told that we've actually run out of time. This is terrible.
No, that's fine.
We certainly need to continue this conversation. I intend to put a spotlight on what you and Selom are doing. And Doc, we intend to address the problem that you've raised head on as a nation all together. Right now, though, it's terrible, but I have to go. We're back tomorrow with another edition of The Pulse. Until then, please go to myjoyonline.com for all of your news updates.